All right, everybody. Hi, everybody. It's Dana Childress. I work with the Integrated Training Collaborative through the Partnership for People with Disabilities at VCU, and I am delighted to be here hosting your December Talks on Tuesday. It's our last Talks on Tuesday for the year, which for the calendar year, which is exciting. We will resume Talks on Tuesdays in 2021 in February. So we're happy to have you here today joining us. We know this is a busy time of year, especially December 1st, right? That's a busy day with our big child count day and all. So we're happy that you decided to join us for your lunch break. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next hour talking about increasing speech language pathologists' cultural competence. But I want to give you, make sure you're aware that even if you are not a speech language pathologist, like I'm not, our presenter is, even if you're not an SLP, you are still welcome to be here. And I guarantee you that you are going to learn some things that are going to give you great information moving forward as you consider your own cultural competence. I think cultural competence, cultural humility are particularly relevant this year, and this is a topic that we have revisited in the past over time because we just feel like it's such an important part of what we do, especially taking time to really purposely examine your biases and think about how you support families so that you really are meeting them where they are with respect and dignity. So before I introduce our presenter, I want to talk to you about just a couple things. We have our lines are all muted today so that we have just our host and our presenter unmuted. That cuts down on background noise. We ask you to please keep your camera off. Sometimes when folks log in, their webcams get triggered. So if your webcam gets triggered, just turn it off for us. We'll keep an eye on that, but we just keep our webcams off. That way you can focus on the presentation. I want to make sure you have two of your tools open today. We will talk you through the tools as we move through, but I want to make sure you have your participant window and your chat window open because we're going to use them. So if you don't, hover your cursor at the bottom of your screen and you should see a black bar appear. In that black bar, you should see a little icon that looks like two people. Click that icon and that will open up your participant box. When your participant box appears, it's usually in the upper right-hand corner. That gives you a list of all the participants joining you today. At the bottom of that list, though, you will see a row of tools. You usually see yes, no, go slower, go faster, things like that. You will also see more, and you will, probably looks like a gray dot, but at least you will see 3 dots. Click on that more icon. When you click on that, you will see additional tools like thumbs up, thumbs down, things like that. We're going to use the thumbs up tool today. So I want you to find your more in your participant box, click on the 3 dots, and go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Jeannie is on it. She got her thumbs up working. Good to see Anna, Barbara, Bailey, Cindy, Elizabeth, Emily. Good, lots of folks are finding it. Again, if you're just joining us, look for your thumbs up icon. Let's see, 25 people have got it. That's great. This is in your participant box. You click on the more icon and look for the thumbs up. Looks like lots of folks have it. If you have trouble with your thumbs up icon, know that Millie says she can't find it. Millie, be sure to open up your participant box, and you do that by looking at your black bar at the bottom. When you hover your cursor, you'll see it looks like 2 little people. When you click on that, open your participant box, then look for the more icon, which has 3 dots in it. Click on that more icon, you'll see more tools open up, and you'll see a little blue thumbs up. Jeannie's typed some directions in chat. So thank you guys for playing along. Millie says, okay, got it, awesome. Hers was under, okay. Well, let's go ahead. Amber says, Amber, you do have some reactions on your tab at the bottom, but I'll tell you the reactions button won't work if we all have our cameras off. So that's why we're directing you to the thumbs up that's in your more menu. So you do have some options there. And you guys, if you struggle, all you've got to do is type thumbs up in chat. That's always your plan B. Speaking of chat, I want to make sure you have your chat window open. So look at that menu bar at the bottom of your screen again. Look for the chat bubble icon, open that up, and just make sure you have your chat open because we're going to use it a lot today as your voice to communicate with Lisa, our presenter, but as your way to also answer questions, make comments about things she's talking about today. So we're going to have lots of fun and lots of time to get to know each other today. So I think that is it for the tools and the orientation. I hope you just sit back and enjoy our presentation today. I'm going to introduce you to Lisa, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. So we are delighted to have Lisa Santra talking to us today and joining us as a Talks on Tuesday presenter. Lisa is the bilingual speech language pathologist and master coach for the Parent Infant Education, or PI program in Arlington. She's been practicing early intervention in the culturally diverse area of Northern Virginia for over a decade and a half. She participates in our state systemic improvement plan. Part of our state systemic improvement plan, which you might know as the SIP, some of the activities involve leadership teams, and Lisa is on our coaching and natural learning environment practices leadership team. She's also a member of her regional early intervention leadership group. Lisa has presented at Creating Connections to Shining Stars, and she recently presented a similar presentation to her colleagues in Arlington on cultural bias. So Lisa, we're happy to have you with us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. Well, I'd like to say welcome to everybody. Today, we're going to focus on this analogy of building our city together, from the foundation to the buildings to the streets that connect those buildings. Because I'm always encouraging that concept of building bridges between colleagues or contractors across localities into families. So what is our agenda? Next, we're going to take a look at that. So we're going to go over why cultural competence is important, what it impacts. We're going to review the evidence-based practices behind it. And although the supportive information and research in the presentation today is from Asha, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, like Dana mentioned before, we are all primary service providers. And the intention is that the information presented here will enhance anyone's service delivery. We're also going to watch a short video, listen to a podcast together, and most importantly, discuss solutions to improve our cultural competence. Finally, we're going to wrap up with some TAMs, our takeaway messages. So next, to explain why this topic is very dear to me, I'm almost always the only Indian SLP, speech language pathologist, in a room. And since the families that we serve in Northern Virginia, where I am practicing, are so diverse, it is so important to constantly be dynamic and learn ways to better work with each unique family. So first, to get to know each other better, it's poll time. So our question today we ask is, what is your ethnicity? So our options are white or Caucasian, Black or African American, Asian, Hispanic or Latino, multiracial, and if it's other, feel free to type that in the chat. So yeah, we see that looks like there's a variety. A lot of people are answering the poll. And so when we're done, we'll have, Jeannie will post those results. Wow, it looks like a variety. Okay, so it looks like a 71% Caucasian, majority Caucasian. We also have 15% Black, 2% Asian. I will also add myself to that, and 11% Hispanic or Latino, and 2% multiracial. So we have a diverse group of individuals and from different ethnic backgrounds, which really means that we have different perspectives and opinions that we can all bring to the table today. So next, to first set up our framework, we're going to talk about what is cultural competence. And today we're going to focus on Asha's specific definition, which states that it involves understanding and appropriately responding to the unique combination of cultural variables in the full range of dimensions of diversity that the professional, the client, patient, family bring to those interactions. So next, we're going to keep in mind 4 key phrases and words from this definition that we're going to touch upon and circle back to in all parts of this presentation. So we're going to keep in mind the words understanding, appropriately responding, cultural diversity, and interactions. So now that we have a shared definition and understanding of what cultural competence is, we're going to next rate our knowledge about how knowledgeable you are about the topic of cultural competence. So we're going to put a fun stamp on where you feel you stand, and I'm going to have Dana explain how to use that stamp feature here in Zoom. Yep, and we're also going to drop those instructions in the chat.
Yep, thanks, Lisa. So Jeannie's put the instructions there, but I'll walk you through it. To access your stamp tool, you're going to hover your cursor at the top of your screen where you see Viewing Dana Childress's screen. Look to the right of those words. You'll see View Options. Click on the downward caret. You will have a drop-down menu appear, and you look for the word Annotate. Once you click Annotate, a menu bar will appear at the top of your screen, kind of looks like just a long bar, and look for the Stamp option. Looks like some folks have found it already. Click the Stamp option, then you'll see a box that gives you access to the different icons, hearts and stars and question marks. Click on the icon you like, and then come down on your slide and click again to drop your icon on the screen. If you have any trouble accessing your stamp tool, don't worry, just type your option into chat. So you always can use chat as your backup. Looks like some folks are using the arrows and drawing. We have lots of different tools folks are using, but Lisa, it looks like people are getting the hang of it.
Perfect. And so it looks like it ranges from about average to excellent, which is perfect because that means everyone will have a lot of information to share during our interactive activities today. So thank you all for using that stamp feature. So now that we
Lisa,
yes.
Can I jump in? I'm going to let folks know I forgot to mention that once we're done with the stamp tool, you guys be sure to either click on your cursor icon in that menu bar or click the red X to get out of your stamp tool. That way your cursor will return to normal and you won't keep dropping hearts. Even though we love hearts and stars, you can return your cursor to normal. Thanks,
That's
Lisa.
perfect. Thank you, Dana, for mentioning that. Yes, otherwise there'll be hearts and stars all over with all the following pages. So thank you for participating in that. And so now that we've gotten to know each other better, we're going to start building this foundation of our city and talk about why it is important. So all of us in each of our areas of expertise, we are bound by our ethics. And these two principles, specifically Asha Code of Ethics principles, Principle 1, Rule C, and Principle 4, Rule L, address discrimination. So both of these principles state that individuals shall not discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, national origin, disability, culture, language, and dialect. But Principle 1 specifically addresses service delivery, and Principle 4 specifically addresses relationships with colleagues, and it also adds socioeconomic status. So next, we're going to get into more of our foundation and the legal supports of our service delivery. So we've all heard of different legal supports. We've heard of different laws, IDEA, HIPAA, FERPA, ADA, ACA, but I'm just going to touch upon 4 of these specifically to just provide some extra information. So IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, in 2006, there was a provision that was added that required states to review ethnicity data in addition to race data to determine presence of disproportionality. So what that is the overrepresentation or underrepresentation of a particular demographic group in special education. So if a significant disproportionality is determined, that state is required to review and revise policies of that LEA, that local education agency, and they were required to reserve maximum funds to provide early intervening services, which is what we do. We do early intervention. And then we have Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Executive Order 13166. Both of these legal supports address language access services for those who don't speak English, and the need for services with limited English proficiency. So these 2 legal supports really focus on why we need to use interpreters. If we don't speak the native language of the family, we legally need to have an interpreter so that they can be supported in the best way possible. And finally here, just to touch upon the ACA, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, this particular act offers funds and grants for programs to increase cultural competence. So what does cultural bias impact? Next, we're gonna talk about more of this foundation and what it impacts. And it's really a domino effect. It literally impacts every single step of our process. So from the intake and gathering the case history to selecting our assessment tools, we might be using the MISE or the ELAP or the HELP. And then we might be having to make some accommodations or modifications, meaning having to omit a question or even changing the way we ask our question when we do those functional assessments. So one question I have for you all to give a thumbs up is have you ever made any modifications to your assessment tools? And to find that thumbs up, you can look in the participants box. You'll see that more button there. And when you click on more, you'll see the thumbs up. And you can, we'll also drop those directions in the chat as well. So the question is, have you ever made a modification to any of your assessment tools? Yeah, so I see a couple people there, several people, more than several, at least 12 or more. I see the thumbs up continuing to go up there. So many people, it looks like, have used, at least 16 or more people have used a modification. And so that's great to hear, because sometimes, as an example is, the use of utensils in that self-care section, it might not always be culturally appropriate to ask. So that might affect the modifications or the questions we ask when we do those reflective questioning when we're using our assessment tools. So thank you for sharing that. And so from the ASP, from that assessment, we create that IFSP and then start therapy. So speaking of therapy, next we're going to take a moment here. And we're going to think to yourself about what differences you may see in this picture as if you're walking into this family's home, and how those cultural differences may affect how you proceed with therapy. So notice, how are they eating? Where are they sitting? What they are eating? Who is doing the feeding? And any other observations you may have. Take 10 seconds to just take it all in. So now, keeping those thoughts in mind, we're gonna next watch a video about cultural competence. So before we watch this video, we're going to just focus on and circle back to two of the 4 words that we talked about in the cultural competence definition. And those components we're going to focus on here is understanding and appropriately responding. So the video will discuss how cultural competence, it is not a destination. It's not one webinar, it's not one training, or even one book you read. It's really a lifelong journey. And we're going to watch this, it's about a 2-minute video about cultural competence, and it's also going to discuss some tools and resources. So we're going to go ahead and play that now.
There's a difference between hearing and listening. It sounds kind of obvious, but when you think about it, hearing is physical, where listening is emotional, contextual, and subtle. Hearing is passive, but listening takes work. And surprisingly, doing it right requires much more than using our ears. We have to be open to new ideas, different points of view, and novel approaches. Hearing is awareness, but listening is understanding. We've got to be willing to make adjustments to make sure we understand what's being conveyed to us, even if it's not in a way we're accustomed to. That's why we're on this journey, to ensure that as professionals, we're sensitive to the needs of all people and cultures, that we recognize that we all have conscious biases, as well as unconscious biases and preconceived notions that we may not notice that influence our work. And because of both, we must work consistently to be attuned to our clients' needs. This journey also means that we recognize diversity, because there's so much we can miss when we don't, and that we're always pushing beyond what we hear to make sure that we're listening. the journey is an ongoing one. Cultural competence isn't a box we check or a course you finish. We're all constantly learning how to be better listeners, implement insight, and better serve the people who trust us to help them. Our actions are the difference, going beyond hearing the call to make sure we're listening to the message. We can always do better, and since we're all in this together, we created a consolidated resource with information, best practices, tools, and more. Because doing it alone, well, that's just unheard of. Visit that'sunheardof.org today.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to still continue to build our foundation. And now we're going to talk about that research that supports cultural competence. So this first article, it's from the Journal of Speech, Language, and Hearing Research. And the title of the article is Cultural Differences in Beliefs and Practices Concerning Talk to Children. So the purpose of this article was to investigate the beliefs and practices in the Chinese culture concerning parent-child interaction and how they might differ from those in Western culture, specifically on the aspects that affect language learning. So why did this study come about? The reason why this study occurred was that there's a large amount of literature on child-directed talk. And what that means is those patterns of speech that are used by caregivers when interacting with young children. But that really primarily describes Western parent-child interacting patterns. So now, since we increasingly engage parents as partners in intervention programs like we do in coaching and early intervention, and Western culture often promotes language learning through this child-directed talk, this study was done to see, is this really culturally appropriate? So in this study, when they refer to Western, they are specifically talking about English-speaking North American culture group that has their roots in Western Europe. And when it refers to Chinese, this study is referring to the broad culture group originating in China. So what they did was they gave surveys to 97 families that had children ages 2 to 4 years old. And then the survey instrument looked at how moms verbally interacted with their kids and how they raised them. So the moms rated these belief systems and interaction patterns. So what are the results? So we're going to look at that next and how those results impact therapy. So this 10-page article, it's summarized here in one single chart. So you can take a moment and skim through the results, but we're going to go through each column by column with you. So that left column is Western parents. And again, this is referring to those North American culture group that are English speaking and have their roots in Western Europe. And then that second column is talking about the Chinese parents, and that's the broad culture group originating from China. And then that impact that this study was able to find. So just going down the chart here, the Western parents in this study were found to really value independence, whereas the Chinese parents valued more social interdependence. So that therapy impact that this study found was that the Chinese parents may be less likely to follow the child's lead or prompt personal narratives. Another finding of this study was that the Western parents encouraged use of gestures, but the Chinese parents really encouraged the use of words rather than gestures. So therapy impact would be that the Chinese parents may not be interested in learning sign language. Another finding was that that nature versus nurture. So Western parents, they found they had more emphasis on nature, and then the Chinese parents had more emphasis on nurture. So that means the therapy impact would be that the Chinese parents, they were more likely to use flashcards and picture books versus frequently reading books. So an additional finding of this study was that Western parents really allowed the children to join in adult conversations. But the Chinese parents, they really more valued the obedience and respect for others. So an impact in this particular study they found was that Chinese parents spoke less with their children about non-shared events, less conversational prompting and less expansions. But there were also similarities that were found. Both parents in this study found that babble was meaningful. They used parallel talk, and in both sets of these parents, they recognize that children understand more before they speak. So now that we've gone through the particular results of this specific study, I'm just going to share some personal experiences of other diverse families I've worked with and share some experiences my fellow primary service providers have shared with me, since this study really focused on that speech. So talking about books. So oftentimes stepping on them or sitting on them for positional or motor support may be looked upon differently by different cultures. So for instance, in my Indian Bengali family, stepping on a book is not okay. If we accidentally touched a book with our feet when I was growing up, I would have to pranam it. And a pranam is a particular touch as a way to respect an object or people. So therapy impact for motor therapists may be to use maybe a shoe box, even an Amazon box, instead of a phone book or stack of books. Another example here in regards to the nature versus nurture. And Western cultures, with our educators and really all of our primary service providers, we really value play, but not all families focus on this. For instance, families I've worked with from the Middle East, or even my just personal friends that were born in the Middle East, have shared with me that parents don't always play with their children. Parents more focus on being providers of food and shelter and basic biological needs. So therapy impact is recognizing that play and encouraging play may look different with those families. And a final PSP, primary service provider example, is that I've really worked with a lot of families from Guatemala, Brazil, and even being a first generation Indian in America, where that extended family, that social interdependence is really highly valued. And you might have a multi-generational household where the grandparents live with the parents as well. And so therapy impact is that we may need to equally involve all the extended family members in the home during therapy. So given these examples of primary service providers outside of this study, it is extremely important, really critical to stress that each individual family is unique, and we cannot make generalizations or overgeneralizations of any culture group. For example, I did grow up in America, and I didn't have any extended family members live with me. So it's really important to get to know your unique family and not make those overgeneralizations. So next, to really wrap up the findings with this study, one of the major clinical implications of this study was that in Western culture, we may commonly recommend reading books, but Chinese parents really reserve this reading for older children because Chinese is not phonologically based and it's really many years of laborious schooling. So functional equivalent is that language learning can alternately happen looking through a family photo album or even storytelling. So now that we've talked about all the evidence that supports our foundation, we're going to move into the analogy of buildings. So next, we're going to talk about those buildings that represent each individual family and how we enter each individual family's home. So circling back really to that definition, those last two of the four key concepts of the definition to keep in mind, these concepts of cultural diversity and interactions. So we're going to share some therapy visit reflections by typing in the chat of when we've worked with families with diverse backgrounds. So some examples of this may be visits you've had with bilingual families. How may have those visits looked different? Feeding therapy with different families, or even that pragmatics or that eye contact during therapy. So please go ahead and type some of your experiences that you've had working with diverse families in the chat. And while people are starting to type, I can just share a personal experience that I have worked with several Vietnamese families, and they have asked me if their child could call me auntie in their language. And so it's happened with several Vietnamese families I've worked with, but not every single one. So again, just knowing that each individual is important to just get to know them better. And so with the chat, just remember at the bottom of your screen, if you're having trouble finding that chat, there's a button that says chat and your window will pop up so that you can type an experience in the chat. So we'll give a couple moments to share, and I know you all have so much to share since there was such a wide variety of experience from average to excellent with cultural competence. So Chris mentioned that some families, she's learned that the value of sleeping together, yes, with their children, and that might be different than Western culture. Carrie mentioned that with feeding, different families have different priorities in terms of self-feeding. In other cultures, children are often fed exactly just like that picture that we had looked at before. Working with Chinese families years ago when they stated that they dress and feed the children until they go to school. So there's so many different experiences that people are sharing here. Some cultures, Lisa mentions that they may be gracious and willing to try their foods, yes, and accept their food when leaving their home, because they might take it as offensive if you don't try, absolutely. Elizabeth mentioning that sometimes there's been siblings that have acted as interpreters, and Jill mentioning that the adult-directed versus child-directed feeding, absolutely. So there's so many different experiences people are sharing. Mary mentions that the Appalachian family had a number of beliefs that many of us would call superstitions, and they didn't believe that a child looking in the mirror before age 1, so play in the mirror for that child was not an option. Exactly, and especially when we used to bring in our giant toy bags and brought all of our items in the home, that really made a difference. And Julianne mentioned that Mexican-American families wanted to share food. Yes, another example of that. And Shivali saying, taking your shoes off and parents feeding the child. And Robin lastly mentioning, asking for permission to bring out a mirror, being asked to take off their shoes at their door. Yeah, so there's many similar experiences there too, especially with the food offerings or taking your shoes off. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your personal experiences. And so now that we've shared our personal experience, we are going to listen to a podcast together. And so this podcast is from Asha Voices, and the speaker is Ijeoma Luo, and she is the author of So You Want to Talk About Race, and she discusses microaggressions. So before we listen, give a thumbs up if you have ever heard of the term microaggressions. So again, you can find that thumbs up looking in the participants box and looking at more, and you'll find it there. So I see many people, 12, 14, 15, upwards of 20 people have heard of microaggressions. So now we're gonna listen to this podcast. It's about 5 minutes long. And while we're listening to the podcast, think of keywords that really stand out to you, and you can drop them in the chat while you're listening or even after listening to the podcast. But it's about a 5-minute clip that we'll listen to, and we'll go ahead and listen to that now.
This is Asha Voices. I'm JD Gray. We know it can be difficult to talk about race, but today's guest says that shouldn't stop us from having those conversations.
A conversation should be a chance to lighten the burden off people of color and to look at what you can do to be part of a solution. So expect discomfort.
That's the voice of Ijeoma Luo. The best-selling author spoke as a special guest of Asha's Office of Multicultural Affairs, or OMA, at the 2019 Asha Convention. She delivered OMA's 50th anniversary address. Joined by former Asha President Elise Davis McFarland, I spoke with Ijeoma at the convention. We discussed the difficulty of addressing race in conversation and also talked about microaggressions. Not familiar with the term? We'll break it down for you later in the episode. In honor of Black History Month, we're turning over our entire program to just this one conversation. I'm JD Gray, and this is Asha Voices. We're going to return to the conversation with author Ijoma Oluo and former Asha president Elise Davis McFarland. During Ijoma's address at the Asha convention, she talked about microaggressions. What are microaggressions? In her book, So You Want to Talk About Race, Ijoma describes microaggressions as, quote, small daily insults and indignities perpetrated against marginalized or oppressed people because of their affiliation with that marginalized or oppressed group, end quote. Ijoma links microaggressions to health issues like raised blood pressure, and she emphasizes the stakes behind these actions. I asked Ijoma to tell us more about microaggressions.
It's really important to recognize that things are called microaggression, but it doesn't mean the impact of them is small. They're called microaggressions because they're kind of the everyday ways in which people of color are made to feel unwelcome and unsafe throughout the world. And these are things that oftentimes people who are perpetuating them against people of color don't realize that they're doing it. But the cumulative effect is incredibly strong. So this is often in comments that people will make, and oftentimes when you're talking about speech, it's around language, word choice, accent. It may seem like a compliment, and it's just everyday little things that might be jokes, snide comments about someone's hair, their appearance, that let them know you belong here. Every time that happens, your body responds to threat. Your body responds to a sense of danger. Your heart rate elevates a little bit. You start breathing a little faster. You get on guard. That is a natural physical response to the thought that you might be facing someone who's hostile to you. When that happens occasionally, no big deal. But when it happens every day, multiple times a day, and you can't predict when, what you do is then you wander around with an elevated response. Your fight or flight response is constantly active, and that wears on you. And it has real long-term health impacts for people of color, whether that's psychological impacts and physical impacts as well. And it hurts people of color. An analogy I'd like to use is if you're walking throughout your day and someone at a couple times a day is going to walk up and punch you in the arm, and you don't know when or where, it's going to hurt. It'll hurt the first time, the second time. By the 50th time, you've got stress fractures and you can't heal and you don't know where it's happening and you run around flinching all of the time, afraid that someone's going to punch you. And then one day someone walks by and they're not even trying to punch you. They're just gesticulating wildly and they hit you in the spot that just broke and you scream. And they turn to you and they say, I didn't mean to. Why are you so sensitive? But you walked by every day seeing that person get punched and you didn't say anything and you didn't think I should be more careful. You are responsible for how you've added to that person's pain. And we need to be looking at the way in which we perpetrate microaggressions against people of color in a similar way. We need to know that we are not just acting alone. We are adding to cumulative, continuous harm that's being done to people of color. The system we live in right now serves nobody. While it does active, real harm to us, it doesn't serve the average white person either. This system is broken, and we have to start imagining more. And I think that what we forget, what I have to remind myself as someone who does this work, is that I am fighting for every individual Black person, every individual person of color. And this means that even though I will not see the end of this system, if I do one thing that gives one person one day, it is worth it. And I think that when we value that and say, you know what, even a day of laughter, a day of joy, a day of feeling heard is worth it, and we will celebrate that, I think the more time we can spend in that space, the better off we will be. We can feel very defeated when we look at the whole system and say, but we can't fix it all. But I think we are worth recognizing that every day of joy we have is worth celebrating and fighting for. And that's what we're fighting for.
Author Ijoma Oluo. Her best-selling book is called So You Want to Talk About Race. She gave the 50th anniversary address for Asha's Office of Multicultural Affairs at the 2019 Asha Convention. To read about the many ways OMA helps Asha members address culture and language and diversity among professionals and those with communication disorders or differences, visit asha.org and search for multicultural.
Yeah, so just listening to her powerful words, what were some key words
This is Asha.
that you thought of or that really stuck out to you while we were listening? So go ahead and type those keywords, 1 or 2 words in the chat. And while you all are finding that chat again, just to let you know that the original podcast is about 25 minutes, and you can listen to the whole podcast, and you'll be able to find that in the references list, in the resources list that will be posted once the webinar has been completed. And so we see breaking point. Yes, Carrie mentions breaking point. Jeannie also show where that references list will be. Cumulative effects cause elevated fight or flight. Simple comments, cumulative effect, again, flinching, Elizabeth mentions. Monica mentions everyday slants, unconscious. Kim mentions hurt. Another Kim Warner, mentions cumulative. And Shivali talks about microaggressions. Again, that cumulative effect that seems to be really sticking out to different people. Jennifer mentions flinching, and that fight or flight response, again, Carrie's mentioning. Ongoing, cumulative, physical effects, so many words. Just listening to her and her voice is such a soothing voice, yet such powerful impact of what she's saying is really sort of how I felt listening to that. Kim Griffith also mentions systemic, and Vicki mentions, why are you so sensitive? Yes, exactly, because everybody, like we said at the beginning, we all come from different backgrounds, and we come from a different place, and we all bring different perspectives to the table. Absolutely. And what stuck out to me was conscious choice that she says at the end. You have to make a conscious choice to be part of a solution. So now we're going to talk about those solutions in this next article. So we're going to walk down those streets that connect those buildings, and we're going to talk about this article from the Asha Leader, the long title being, Look at Your Blind Spots. Do unconscious preconceptions shape clinical judgment? A school-based clinician offers ways to uncover and address implicit bias. So in this article, there was a CF, a clinical fellow, in a diverse public school, and she collaborated with the school psychologist to determine who qualified for the developmental preschool program. But she noticed that many kids were borderline kids, and she wondered if her implicit biases were playing a role, knowing that there are vast inequities in the school district and across the country. So what's implicit bias? It's those attitudes, stereotypes that unconsciously affect our understanding, actions, and our decisions. And we all have those. And so also in this study, it talked about the 2016 Yale Child Study Center study. And in this study, it looked at Black and white preschool teachers, and they were asked to watch a video and look for problem behaviors. But none of the children actually had any problem behaviors, but the researchers tracked the teacher's eye movements when they were looking at the video. So the results showed that both Black and white teachers spent a disproportionate amount of time searching for those problem behaviors in Black boys. So although the teachers did not explicitly state a belief that the Black boys presented with more challenging behaviors, their unconscious biases affected their perceptions of these children. So it happens all the time. We all have unconscious biases. So what are we going to do about that? So these next 2 slides, we're going to discuss solutions. And this is really why any of us take webinar or any training, to really learn some new skills that we can implement immediately in our practice to enhance it. So this article, we're going to focus on ways to reduce bias and ways to strengthen our cultural competence. So we're going to continue to walk down the street and figure out ways on how to reduce our bias. So we'll go through each of these. And so the first one, replace stereotypes, label it, reflect, then consider an unbiased response. Next, counter stereotypic imaging. Think of personal people in your life maybe even a famous people or person who counter those stereotypes that you might hold. And then individuate, get that specific information. We've talked about this several times already. Get specific information about people or the family you're working with, rather than associate those characteristics with a group of people. And then take a different perspective. Really imagine yourself as a person from the group towards you hold those biases. And lastly here, seek out ways to engage in positive interactions, increase those opportunities with individuals from different backgrounds. So next we're going to get that stamping tool out again. And if you could stamp over which of these strategies really speak to you that you might want to try. So again, to find that stamping tool, look at the top of the screen where it says view options, choose annotate, and then you'll find one of those fun stamps. So we see lots of people stamping here. So many people are stamping on increased opportunities, to really all over, so many stamps. And so it looks like there's just a variety of things that people want to try, especially the increased opportunities and individuate, taking a different perspective. Yes, there's just so many actions that we can individually take to really make a difference. And just look at that beautiful chart with all those hearts, stars, and check marks. Thank you for participating in that. And thank you for letting us know which strategy you might want to try yourself. So just remember to X out of the stamping mode so you don't keep stamping as we go to the next street. We're going to connect this street of reducing a bias to another street of strengthening cultural competence. So, and remember all of this resources and information, it will be in the resource list, but one of the items in this article talked about an implicit association test. And this is from Harvard, developed by the Project Implicit. And so that's an opportunity to do. There's also a bias cleanse. It's a 7-day cleanse that you sign up for, and then you would get recommendations in your inbox on how to change your associations. And this was developed by the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity and MTV. And just it's important to note that the time that this article was written, that this was an active link, but as we know, internet sites come and go, so it's actually not active right now, but we encourage you to go ahead and search for bias cleanse if this is one that interests you again in the future. But it was such a unique opportunity, we wanted to make sure we kept it on the list. Another opportunity here to strengthen your cultural competence is talk to the clinicians, talk to the young people, because there's so many different experiences that everyone has in their lifetime, and it's constantly changing. So you might be able to learn about some more ways to counter your implicit biases. And working with others to get trainings on the concept of implicit bias. Then encouraging a dialogue just among colleagues, and really be honest about your own experiences with bias, and ask questions of others who have a different perspective, because we're all about learning from each other. And finally, increasing familiarity with issues surrounding race, gender, and socioeconomic inequity in your specific community where you practice, because that is going to be very different for each individual. So next, we're going to dig deeper and put more pieces together of cultural competence in your own personal life. So there are 2 cultural competence checklists available. One is about personal reflection, and the other is about service delivery. And both of these will also be posted with the resources. There'll be PDF handouts so that you can also access them at a later time. So today we're gonna just touch upon and focus on that second one about the service checklist delivery. And so next, we're gonna just circle back to that first research article that we talked about with Chinese and Western beliefs and practices concerning talk to children. So that first example on the left side that's highlighted in red, it talks about recognizing different narrative styles. And in that article, it discussed it discussed that prompting personal narratives in the Western culture or not, as they did in the Chinese culture, which was based on valuing independence that we found in that study that was more focused on Western culture versus that social interdependence that they found in that Chinese culture. And then on that right side there, that's highlighted in red, the second example refers to those alternative methods of sharing experiences. So we previously discussed that functional equivalent of oral storytelling. So as we continue to build our city with our foundation, building, and streets, now we're going to discuss how we can build bridges to families and between each other as primary service providers. So we're going to use chat now. And if you could share your takeaway message in the chat box. This can be something you learned about, a law, research, someone else's experience that you heard about that we discussed today, or maybe a different cultural competence strategy that you've already tried that we didn't touch upon, or even how you'll be able to use this information and enhance your own clinical practice. So as people are thinking about that and writing their TAMs, their takeaway message in the chat, I can just share that during my research and putting this presentation together, I did learn about that 2006 provision of IDEA about disproportionality. At the time in 2006, I was working in a private practice and I was also doing EI, but that was information that was new to me that I didn't specifically know. So that was helpful. So what are some of your takeaway messages that you might think about after hearing this presentation today? I'll give a couple moments. Continue the journey. Yeah, Elizabeth mentions continue the journey, never stop. Listen to understand. Yes. And Amber mentioned never assume you know what is most appropriate or best for the family. Absolutely. And coaching really helps us reflect on that more for sure here in Virginia. Kim mentions the video of microaggressions was so powerful. Yes. And Sarah mentions making sure to ask families about all routines their family culture participate in and how instead of only assuming that they are different. Absolutely. Karen mentions there's no cookie cutter solution for every situation or family. Yes. Tiffany mentioned a cultural lifelong journey again. Yes. Lisa is saying observe the family's interactions and use information to guide the strategies you choose to facilitate. Be open to new ideas. Yeah, and that's the key, really being open in all of our interactions. Kim Griffith mentions ask families about their culture, about their cultural preferences, and what they'd like me to be aware of. Absolutely. Starting with an openness right at the beginning of therapy is always helpful. Shivali mentions, again, listen to understand. And Julianne mentions, be open to learning about each family. Absolutely. And so, and individuate, Yolanda mentions. So next, I want to thank you all for really helping build this city together. It means so much that you took the time to really participate in this important topic in our world right now. This topic has been around for a while, but it's even important now with our ever-changing world. And just remember, you, me, it's up to each of us to individually do our self-growth, to learn, to change how we dynamically engage in working with these culturally diverse families. And even if your community or locality is not quite as diverse as Northern Virginia, you may eventually, maybe after we're out of this 2020, take a trip, be in an airport or an airplane where you see others that might not look like you. And so cultural competence is really important, not only at a professional level, but also in our personal lives. And we in EI, we have this privilege and really this honor of working with the littlest population. And together we can make such a collective, direct, and positive impact on hundreds and hundreds of families. And like the video said at the beginning, cultural competence is not a destination, it's a lifelong journey. So really, to end, as you're on this journey, always know that I love building bridges and meeting new colleagues. So please email me. I would love to hear from you and to discuss this topic or any other topics more in depth. Thank you so much for spending your lunch afternoon with me today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm seeing some love in the chat, which is awesome. Chris gave you lots of so's. That was always nice. Love learning from you every day, so that's so nice. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and to share what you know and to share your great tips and ideas. It's always so nice, too, to have somebody help us revisit the research and go back to what, sort of what we should be doing, because often we get sort of stuck in what we are doing. So I love it. I love Chris even added some hearts to our diagram, which is awesome. I do want to just call your attention. You guys might have to scroll back a little bit, but Lisa Terry, who's on my team with me, she has dropped our social media links into chat in case you want to continue the conversation on social media or you want to follow the professional development team for more resources. That's a place to go. Jeannie has also dropped the chat for the feedback survey for today's webinar in chat. So please click on that and take a look at that. We'd love to get your feedback. It helps us plan for future Talks on Tuesday webinars, and it certainly helps us tweak our process so that we can make these webinars as useful to you as possible. You will also, after today's webinar, receive an email with the same link to the survey in your email. If you'll click that link, take the survey, and then once you complete the survey, that's how you get access to your certificate of participation today. So you have documentation that you spent this hour, and you can use that, that certificate toward your professional development, toward your certification, those kind of things. I do want to ask you to stay tuned. We will be putting out information about our next Talks on Tuesday, which will be February, probably soon. Registration usually comes out the month before, so stay tuned in January and look for more information for our next webinar, next topic, and presenter. But for now, I want to say a big thank you again to Lisa for all the time and energy you put in to preparing this presentation for us. I really appreciate it. And I think it's a great way to end 2020 on such a positive, sort of kind and caring note. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. A special thank you to Dana and Jeannie for all the technical support. I really appreciate it.
We are happy to do it. And I forgot to call Jeannie out at the beginning. So we'll give a big shout out to Jeannie Schroeder's our technical specialist who does all the back end work to make these webinars work so well. So yeah, a big yay for Jeannie. So thanks everybody. We will hang out for just another minute in case you have any questions in chat. But otherwise, thank you for joining us today. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.